Hey everybody, welcome to another IAIB Spotlight presented to you by the International Association of Internet Broadcasters. And this week, we have a guest that I wanted to have on our first show. Kirk Harnack has become a big name in internet broadcasting, in my opinion. A great show called This Week in Radio Tech that actually broadcasts on the GFK network. Now, Kirk, I'm not just saying that because you do a show on the GFK network. I've been a fan of the show prior, and I would like to welcome you to the show, and it's a pleasure to have you on here.
Thanks. I'm so delighted that you asked me to be on here. I was really surprised. Oh my gosh, Andrew wants me to be on an IB, and I said, what for can I possibly add? Well, we're going to interview you about broadcasting and maybe podcasting. So
yeah, you have a 30-year history in radio, and you made the transition to internet broadcasting, and we've had a lot of conversations off the air, and you kind of see the importance of where the industry is headed and how it should embrace the internet as a serious way of sending the information out there. You know, radio's made this transition over the last couple of years, and the question is the internet the new home for all things radio?
That is a great question. And you know, I think the answer to that lies a lot in what we individually, how we consume things. So you know, it's hard to be unbiased. We live our lives. We gravitate toward one thing or another in terms of our content consumption. And I've been noticing that what my habits are. Of course, I used to listen to the radio a lot driving. I used to listen to, but a lot of times I'd listen to cassettes. There were a few songs I just loved to hear those same songs over and over and over again. So this was many, many years ago.
Now, were you a fan of radio growing up? Is that what steered you in that direction, or was it the technology that got you involved in radio?
I wasn't nutty about it. I guess one thing that inspired me was I had a next door neighbor when I was a kid growing up in the little town of Winfield, Kansas. And he had a little transistor radio that he got maybe from Radio Shack or who knows. And he was picking up WLS in Chicago. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool because there's no cool stations around here, that's for sure. And so I got a radio too. And then a couple of years later, my dad got me a Heathkit kit for a shortwave radio. And I made a little antenna for it, strung it around the attic in our 2-story wood frame house in Winfield, Kansas, hooked the ground to the water pipe and started tuning around. And the first thing I heard was HCJB from Quito, Ecuador.
Wow.
And now it was all religious programming, which okay, that's fine, you know. But it didn't hold my attention 24/7. But that's pretty cool. Now I never became one of these guys that just goes crazy listening to shortwave stations. But I like to every once in a while tune in and just see what's out there. So yeah, that kind of got things started. But then my dad got a stereo. Right, he bought a stereo used from some dude down the street. I don't know if before Craigslist, of course, before the interwebs, it was the local paper, and he got this little stereo and the speakers, and so I'm tuning around and tuned into my first top 40 station somewhere near Wichita, Kansas. I did, you know what? Thanks for asking. I did become a fan of radio when I was a kid, laying in bed at night. I had a 5-tube Sears radio, an AM radio, and I listened to KFH. In Wichita, Kansas, 1330 on the dial, and I would listen to their nightly news and then the CBS Radio Mystery Theater. And I would go to bed each night just shaking from being scared from the stories.
See, there's so many stories like that. I mean, when my fascination with radio started young too. My grandfather used to make radios.
Oh, and really?
I remember seeing, I had to have been like 4 or 5 years old. I remember him actually making a radio, and I was always fascinated by it. And my parents they got a new, I guess, stereo unit years ago, and they put the older one in my room because I always asked, can I have the radio in my room? I didn't have the TV. And I would just fiddle around, and in the middle of the night, you would have like these crazy shows. I mean, like 2 o'clock in the morning. I was probably like 11 years old during the summer, and you would, you're playing around, and you would find like really bizarre radio shows on at that time. Stuff that you wouldn't find. Like I forgot the conspiracy guy. It was a local conspiracy show here in New York, and it wasn't coast to coast, but it was on like 1 o'clock in the morning on an AM station. I would just sit there and I would listen to it, and I was just so fascinated by it. But that's pretty much how I got into it. And also, my dad was big into CB radio, like the CB walkie-talkies. Every time we would travel the country, So we would always have a CB, and I was always amazed by the fact that these people are just talking over this.
Yeah, with nothing connecting the cars together, just the ether.
So I was fascinated. You know, I listened to talk radio growing up. I always loved it, and that's kind of what got me into this. So I love to hear the stories behind people and what got them into it. But you were also involved in the technology, not just the talking portion of it. How did you get involved in the actual engineering behind radio?
Even as a kid, I enjoyed learning, playing with kits. Like I said, my first kit was a rather advanced kit. It was this shortwave radio from Heathkit. I think at the time, I think my dad spent $60 on it, which was a lot of money for us back in 1971. But the other thing that turned me on to radio, at least being on the talent side, catch this. When I was a child, I stuttered profoundly.
You would never know.
I could not say my name. The teacher wouldn't call. I mean, after first grade, the teachers learned not to call on Kirk to read in class because it was going to take a long time and all the kids would make fun of him. So I got called a lot of names and made fun of for not being able to just talk. Couldn't say my name. Couldn't say the name of the street I lived on. You know, Fifth Street. You know, my whole life was like that. It was just terrible. And I went to speech therapy in public school, and that maybe helped a little bit. I'll tell you what finally cured it for me. But yeah, the radio would be the last thing I would go into. So of course, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Yeah, I wanted to get on the radio and talk to people. And I even one day went up to visit our local radio station in Winfield, Kansas, KNIC. Their slogan was "Nice radio for nice people," and it was above the First National Bank in downtown Winfield, Kansas. And I trudged up the stairs one day and poked my head in and said, "Could I look around?" The lady said, "Well, you can look through the window." So that was my whole taste of local radio.
I was always fascinated. As a kid, I used to watch Frasier. Not really a kid. I mean, I was probably like 10, 11 years old, and the fact that he was on a K station and it wasn't a W. Yeah. I always found that interesting, and I didn't know what that meant at that age. So I went to the library, and I asked the librarian, like, why is it a K and it's a W? And she looked at me like I was crazy. Like, she had no idea what I was saying. But I actually researched it and found out, you know, depending on what side of the country you're on, it's a K and a W. So I always found that interesting. And I have an obsession with air checks and radio jingles.
Yeah.
And I got that when I would listen to WPIX here in New York, Channel 11, when they would turn off, because at one point, even at my age, they would turn off the station. And it would just be, you know, the bars. They would do a call check, and they would say, you know, WPIX New York 11, and they would do the call letter, and they would sign off. I was always fascinated by that. And people found it bizarre that I always liked that stuff. But, I mean, you know, you kind of grab onto things like this, and it kind of evolves into what you end up doing later on.
You know, speaking of color bars, and I was weird that way too. I would when I finally got a TV set in my room when I was a teenager, I would usually fall asleep during a rerun of the FBI with Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. Now I know this is all way before your time, Andrew, but then I'd wake up when they would play the bars and put the tone on the air. Oh, wake up and turn the TV off. And it was funny. I never knew what the colors were. Well, first of all, I had a black and white TV set. Later, I had a color TV, and for a while, my first job in radio was working at a public radio station, which was tied to a university television production facility. This was at Eastern Kentucky University in Richmond, Kentucky, and the TV area had a grant to produce EMT, emergency medical technician, EMT training tapes. So one of the professors there put together this multi-part series for EMT training. It was a multi-year project. But I remember the color bars going by, and to this day I still remember. You know, they're white, yellow, cyan, green, magenta, red, and blue from left to right. So if you ever have to adjust your set, which you don't anymore, it's white, yellow, cyan, green, magenta, red, and blue.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you remembered it from that age. You know, that's how it stuck in there. So I want to ask you, what was your first radio gig? When you went to college, did you go for anything with radio? How did you go in that path at that point?
You know, I didn't go to college at the age of 18 like most folks do. When I graduated high school, I was all set to go to a small college called Berea College in Berea, Kentucky. And that summer, before college, I got the job managing the local radio station, which was the job that I was going to go to college 4 years to get. So I decided to skip college. And honestly, I wasn't very excited about it. My dad is a major university professor, a great guy, and written a lot of books and taught a lot for years, retired now. And he was fully expecting me to go to college. And I'm sure I disappointed him greatly. I did go back and go to college later and got a meteorology degree from Mississippi State University. So I skipped college. So when I became manager of the radio station, this was WKXO in Berea, Kentucky, which is still there at 1500 on the dial. I couldn't afford to hire an engineer. I had to fix stuff myself. So it's a funny story. One day, there's a lightning storm in Berea, Kentucky, and the transmitter goes off the air. So I thought, well, I better go out to the transmitter site and see what's wrong. So I drove out to the transmitter site, still in the same place next to the railroad tracks on the north side of Berea, and I go out there and I unlock the door. It's a small little concrete building. Open the door. And there's smoke coming out. And I know I don't have a fire extinguisher there, but there's smoke coming out of the building.
Oh, no.
And so I go inside and I hold my breath because the smoke is probably noxious. It's black. And I open the back door to the transmitter. The transmitter, for you transmitter buffs, it was a Gates BC250GY. How I remember that, I don't know, but it's a 250-watt transmitter. Nowadays, you can fit that entire transmitter's working into something the size of a Genelec speaker, which I have over here. I mean, just a bread box. The whole transmitter would fit in a bread box nowadays.
And how big was it at that point?
Bigger than a refrigerator.
Yeah, it was gigantic, yeah.
Stand inside, and if you didn't touch anything, you could turn it on, and it would work all around you. So I opened the door, look and see what's smoking. Well, what's smoking was... seems like it was a phenolic board that had some resistors on it or something. So I ran outside, took a gigantic breath of air, went back inside, and went, and I blew the fire out. Blew the freaking fire out. So, and it seems like I ended up, I got the manual out, I kind of understood what the parts were. I knew what a diode was and a capacitor and stuff like that. So, the big diodes in this thing had mercury vapor rectifier tubes. And anyway,
oh, wow.
I ended up fixing the transmitter. It wasn't seriously damaged. I don't know why it had caught on fire, but I got it fixed and we were back on the air the next day and I fixed it.
That's amazing. I mean, the fact that you learn, I mean, the fact that you have to learn in the middle of a fire, I think that's the amazing part. But the fact that you couldn't afford an engineer and you had to learn as you went along is fascinating to me.
And in electronics, I am fully self-taught. I've read a lot of manuals. I'll tell you what I did. I bothered the folks at Harris and at ITC3M a lot. There's tech support guys. Hey, okay, I've got the manual here, and the solenoid on the cart machine's not coming up, and I'm trying to figure out, I'm losing the signal here and here, and so can you tell me what this transistor does? And they say, well, that's an NPN transistor, so what happens is the base goes low, and then it passes. Yeah. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So I got an education just by not being a complete idiot. By let me give some advice to folks who are trying to learn, whether you're trying to learn meteorology or weather or sewing or calligraphy, it doesn't matter. If you can pinpoint that which it is that you don't know and work on that, if you have the ability to figure out what you don't know, then you have a chance of becoming self-taught. And somehow I was gifted in life with this ability to pretty well be able to home in on what it is that I don't know. And I talk to other people who are self-taught in whatever their profession is, and that is a really key thing. Now, if you haven't got a clue as to what to look up next, you really don't know anything about it, then you're going to have a problem. Then class is for you. Then a structured learning environment is for you. But I never did all that well in a structure. I mean, I got A's in school, but I wasn't that interested. So that's my...
I guess it comes down to, the topic that you're interested in, and you found this and you realize, wow, this is something I really like and I'm interested in, and you kind of stuck to that path, and you were able to absorb all the information that was coming your way. Yeah,
well, you start with what you know, and it doesn't hurt to read the manual.
No. But what's that? Nobody reads the manual anymore.
TFM, just RTFM.
One of the best manuals I've ever read, Mackie. They make interesting manuals. They make it fun.
And the schematics are hilarious too. There's a party over here at Bob's house.
Yeah.
The schematic.
So now you become kind of known as a Telos guy. I mean, a lot of people know you from the company from Telos. How did that happen? How did that relationship build?
I got a feeling that my feeling about Telos before I became an employee with Telos was not uncommon. And that is, when for years, I was a contract engineer. I didn't work for any particular station full time. I started my own business, and hey, I'll come fix your radio station, or I'll do your maintenance and repairs for X number of dollars per week or per month. And with regard to Telos, I always perceived their products as being higher priced than others. And I always perceived them as being kind of a snooty company, having a bit of a snooty attitude. In fact, one time I ordered a Telos 1X6 phone system for a sports production house in Lexington, Kentucky. And 4 weeks went by and it hadn't shown up yet. And I called the dealer from whom I bought it, and they said, "Well, it's not shipping. It's not shipped yet, and it'll be a couple or 3 more weeks." I said, "Well, I need to know when to put it in. I mean, isn't this off the shelf?" And they said, "No, we don't know when it'll ship, but you'll be happy when it does." So you'll be happy when you get it. Okay, so I can't plan my life around shipping anything from Telos. So I didn't have this great impression of Telos. Well, a few years later, a really smart guy at Telos, a guy named Neil Glassman, who now lives in New York City and does business consulting. Neil Glassman found out about a bunch of contract engineers, and including me, and invited us to Telos, that they were going to pay the airfare and pay us our daily rate to be there. Oh my goodness. I said, sure, I'll come up. And they spent 2 days educating me and others on how, the Zephyr works, for example, the IP codec. I mean, the ISDN codec, the Zephyr, and hybrids work, and how multi-line phone systems work. And I walked away just, feeling a lot better about Telos. And then we did some comparisons. We compared Telos hybrids with other brands. And oh my goodness, I never had a chance to A/B the two before. I'd buy at the time a Gettner hybrid and put it into our system because it cost $200 less than a Telos hybrid. And oh my goodness, I didn't know what I was missing. The Telos hybrid made the callers sound better.
I mean, I'll tell you something. With the call, if you're talking about the calls, Spencer Coburn uses a system from Telos.
Yeah,
for his, and he went from the what was Spencer using prior?
It was either a Gettner or Comrex.
The Comrex, yeah. And I mean, the first time I listened to it when we finally got everything up and running was the quality of the calls. A lot of the peaking wasn't there. A lot of times calls would call in and you could tell, they're talking like this with the phone in their mouth. It kind of took that out and it cleaned up the audio. And it's a huge difference. And if there's an IP caller now, a voice over IP call, it sounds unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. And that whole technology is moving right on ahead. Telos is certainly doing it. And I will say, in all sincerity, our friends at Comrex, they're also in the game too of doing SIP, Session Initiation Protocol, SIP calls. SIP is the most popular protocol for handling voice over IP. But SIP calls can sound amazing, especially if you're calling in like. Telos has a customer in Tampa. It's Cox Broadcasting in Tampa, and they have one of our VX phone systems, which is all SIP. Now, if you have to convert, POTS or ISDN lines into SIP, then you can do that with a device called a gateway from a third party. But bottom line is, you can put an application on your phone. There's a free one, I believe it's called CSIP Simple, CSIP Simple, and it'll do G.722. Now, that's a codec, because G.722 is a codec. And I got to tell you, it's interesting where two industries collide, broadcasting and telephony. To an engineer, to a broadcast engineer, the G.722 codec, and it's a codec just like MP3 or MP2 or AAC, but the G.722 codec is kind of like the codec of last resort. It's like the lowest common denominator. Okay, well, we're going to have to do this broadcast over G.722 because that's the only language that our, this brand of codec and that brand of codec have in common. But to the phone company, or to the industry of the telephony, G.722 is like, wow, this sounds great, and it does. And Polycom and Cisco and others are calling G.722 HD voice.
Really?
Yeah, it sounds. It's 7.5 kilohertz.
Okay.
bandwidth, which for voice is, that's not movie quality. That's not really what we call contribution quality, but it's just fine for, what was previously a phone caller on G.711, and that's the industry standard telephone codec. That's what Ma Bell has always used, is G.711.
To kind of talk about that a little bit, how has cell phones and voice over IP calls affected the way that radio takes calls? Did the hardware makers have to kind of change the way that they use the codecs? Are specific codecs better for certain types of calls?
Yeah, it's a good question. Cell phones use different codecs. Let me see if I can try to get this right. All cell phones really cram the data down to a low data rate, and that's often why we think of cell phones as sounding really bad, even in a decent signal environment. Now, I don't have the exact data on this, but I've noticed that some cell phone calls within the same carrier, like a call from a Verizon phone to a Verizon phone, will usually sound better than a Verizon phone to a T-Mobile phone, because they're changing from one codec to another, and that the word is escaping me right now. I'm sure somebody in the chat room will do it. Not transcribing, but transcoding. Transcoding two low bitrate codecs can sound really bad.
Yeah.
Well, bottom line is, you put a caller on the air who's calling in from a cell phone, and it can sound not so good depending on what data rate they happen to be getting. And then, to make matters even worse, let's say that, my friend Tom Ray at WOR, they have been running HD radio on the WOR signal, which is a pretty low bit rate. It's on AM, and I don't know if it's 16 or 18 or 20 or 22 kilobits per second, but it's really down there. It can sound okay, but never better than okay. Well, anyway, you take a low bit rate cell phone call and you put it on the air on a low bit rate AM HD signal, and it doesn't sound so good anymore. It's really hard to understand. Now, are we getting away from that? Absolutely. Sprint and other companies are all looking at better codecs for their phones to get better voice quality across from one place to another. And where I was going with that, Cox Broadcasting in Tampa, is that with this application on your phone, CSIP Simple, you end up using not your GSM voice connection, not that data, but you end up using your data plan connection to send 64 kilobit per second, G.722, directly to, let's say, an asterisk phone system at your radio station, and from that into your VX phone system for on the air. The VX has a G.722 codec in it. Bottom line, you get 7.5 kilohertz of audio from a smartphone to on the air. And as long as the data is not getting corrupted by moving around on the cell phone, which normally it's okay, you've got something that sounds, to my engineer friends, I hate to use the word broadcast quality, because it is G.722, which is, like I said, the codec of last resort for a broadcaster. But compared to a phone call, it sounds great. And you go to, it sounds, better than, most Marty things, or it's just, it's a big upstep in quality. And so some stations are beginning to, our friends at Comrex have an app that I think stations can sell or give to their listeners. Bottom line is, you call in with a G.722 codec, and it comes in on a certain line on your phone system, and the station says, "Hey, we'll put you at the front of the line if you get the KXYZ phone app," and it's going to sound better.
That's amazing, actually. I guess radio stations benefit from that. I didn't know that it was available to all the callers, so they could use the app to call in.
Well, this is a new thing, and I believe Comrex is our competitor is doing this. It's something that Telos is looking at doing as well. Bottom line, it's good for radio stations because it makes the callers sound better, and it makes the P1 callers, the P1 listeners, those who are the primary radio station listeners, the ones that the station doesn't want to tick off, they want to keep, they're loyal, they'll fill out diaries, nice. We want to make them feel special. So we get them to download an app that puts them at the front of the line if they're calling in for a talk show or just to make a request.
So I want to touch on this. You brought up broadcast quality, and on the internet, it's a little bit different. We're used to hearing a certain type of sound when you're in the car and you listen to radio. And for anybody that kind of follows it, there's a lot of processing that goes into it, and specific things are done so it sounds that way in the car. But internet radio broadcasts really don't sound that way. If you ever listen to my show, or even TWiRT Network or anybody else, it feels like it doesn't sound like it's on the radio. Now, do you think that broadcast way, the broadcast sound of that we're used to from FM should transition into the internet, or do you think it's totally different types of ways of broadcasting, and the audio will always be different on the internet?
And part of this is for decades thought from program directors of radio stations that we need to be the loudest thing on the dial. There's a couple reasons to maximally use whatever transmission scheme that you're using. If you're an FM station and people are listening on car radios, that they can quickly punch bam, 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 bam from one station to another. The brain has a fairly short memory for how loud something was. So, but if you're punching around FM station to FM station, your brain can make a real fast comparison about who's louder. And subliminally, all other things being equal, and they never are, but all other things being equal, the louder station is perceived as being better if all other things are equal, which they never are. So there's always been a drive to be loud. Now, there are reasons to be loud, so that, if I'm at home here at my office and I'm, want to listen to something, and I sweep, and I got to turn on the vacuum cleaner and sweep the floor down here, I don't want to drown out what I was listening to. So I'd like for it to be loud. If I'm driving the car and I want to hear a symphony, and there's parts that are so low I can't hear it, I crank it up, and then the loud part comes along, I got to crank it back down or blast the speakers out. I mean, there's reasons to have a consistent amount of loudness. Now, to answer your question, we've gotten to the point with FM and AM radio that is just almost ridiculous as far as what we have to do to the audio to make it loud. The good news is the folks at Omnia, my employer, and the folks at Orban, and these are the two top players in the audio processing industry, they've gotten pretty good at being able to be loud without really destroying the audio. In fact, it's possible to be loud and really enhance the audio, let you hear stuff that you didn't hear before, good stuff. I've heard I was driving in Cleveland, Ohio a few months ago, and I punched up a rock station. I think it was WNCX maybe. And they played a Fleetwood Mac song, and I thought, wow, is that a new mix? That sounds really good. And I went in the next day and talked to my colleague, Corny Gould. Corny, what's at NCX running? Oh, they're running an Omnia 11. Wow, I heard stuff in that mix I've never heard before. Yeah, it's really cool. So that's one thing, to be loud and without being stupid distorted on FM. For internet broadcasting, remember I talked about the length of time your brain remembers how loud something was. For internet broadcasting, if you switch from one station to another, there's some time delay there. It's got to rebuffer the new station.
Sure.
And so your brain forgets how loud the previous station was. So there's not this need on the internet or even on HD radio or even on satellite radio to be to the nth degree as loud as you can be. Now, there still is the desire to have a consistent amount of audio quality. If you're playing classical music on the internet, not so important to be freaking loud all the time. If you're just trying to play something that's intelligible, here's where the problem comes in. So many podcasts are just awful for their audio level. Something's really loud, something's really soft, the whole thing's really soft.
But do you attribute that to the hardware, or do you attribute it to the lack of understanding of how to configure things?
Understanding of how to configure things and how to monitor audio levels. Monitoring audio levels, I don't know, doesn't seem to come naturally to anybody. I've walked into so many radio stations where one song, the meter's just barely wiggling. Oh, I should do this way for TV. Okay. Meter's barely wiggling. And other songs are just pegging the meter out and it's hitting the stop on the right. And I go to the disc jockey and I say, are you watching the levels on the meter? Because that's really pretty high. And what's the disc jockey's answer? Oh, I was told to put the knob right here.
And that's all you do. You don't touch it.
My response is, we can hire a monkey to put the knob right there. Your job is just the knob, usually right there. But if it's not right there, adjust the knob so the level's right. And so when you talk, you're not, banging the meters out. Yeah, so I find this incredible carelessness as to here's one reason why. The human ear in a natural setting can put up with a huge dynamic range, huge. And yet for transmission purposes, we want to be within a much smaller dynamic range to maximally use the bits or the modulation or whatever it is that we're using to transmit the audio. There's something else that comes into play too. Have you ever been to, I don't know, a city council meeting where you're there live in person? You're sitting in the audience. Your brain has this way of picking out who's talking and ignoring noises. You ignore people coughing all the time. You ignore people sneezing. You ignore a baby crying. Well, maybe don't ignore that so much. But if you record this meeting from the position of where you are sitting, it sounds terrible. That's all you hear is people's coughing and noises and shuffling of feet and the fan coming on. You barely hear the guy in the city council who's talking.
Yeah, they're absolutely right.
And I forget the name of this effect. It may have something to do with the brain's, I want to say reticular activating system, but I could be totally wrong about that concept. But the point is that when you're live somewhere, your eyes, your brain, your just the feeling of pressure on your body from noises, this all plays into your brain being able to pick out what to listen to. Well, if you're listening to the radio or a recording, or the same sound coming that was recorded and now coming through a speaker, all the abilities of the human body to focus on something, they all go away. So that's why it's critical with audio to mic people closely or appropriately closely.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that's a big problem that internet broadcasting faces is, the lack of experience also. And, when you're listening to the radio, there's so much that goes into it rather than just a mixer and a microphone. A lot of people think you just pop on a mixer into a mic, pop a mic into a mixer, and you're fine. You could just go online. But there's so much that's involved. And recently we got the DBX mic processors here. We got 4 of them for the studio, and we're using 286S preamp processors. And just using that alone, and I don't know if the viewers could hear, but I could hear it here. There's a big difference in the audio quality. There's a boom. There's presence behind it.
Your the audio sounds great, and it sounds great for an audio podcast too. I'll give you another great example that anybody could understand about this. Think about television news. TV newscasters always wear a lapel or a shirt clip-on microphone. It's usually down here, and these mics are fine for that purpose. And if you're watching the TV newscast, your brain is looking at the newscaster, and you're hearing their mic, and your brain says everything is fine, everything is great. It sounds like, it sounds very natural. If, however, you remove the video and you just listen to the audio, all of a sudden you notice that mic is not near the person's lips. That mic is off a distance. You hear shuffling and ruffling of a dress or of a suit jacket. You hear ruffling of a shirt against the microphone. You hear other extraneous noises that you never noticed if you had the video to go along with it. And that's, if you've ever listen to a radio station that, or even some of the Sirius XM satellite channels that will take a TV newscast like Fox News or CNN headline news and just put that audio on the radio, it works, but it's not nearly as good as a radio show having the mic. That's why guys like you, guys like Leo Laporte, other podcasters who get this, they get them. Doesn't matter what it looks like on TV. Let's get a real microphone here that's going to sound good for our audio listeners.
I always say sound first, video second. I mean, I could look as good as I could look as good as network television, but if my audio's awful, you're going to have an issue listening to me.
Yeah, we can divert our eyes. We can't divert our ears.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about the future of radio right now and where it's headed. I want to get back to the technical stuff too. There's so much I could ask you, Kirk, honestly, because this is all fascinating stuff to me, and I'm into it, so I'm going to be bouncing all over the place when an idea comes into my head. Radio has really changed over the last 20 years. The direction that radio is headed, some may say there is no direction, and they really don't know where they're headed as far as content goes. But as far as, AM and FM, after they say FM killed AM, but where is there a place for AM still?
Oh, that's a great question. And I always thought that AM ought to be dwindling, and yet in some markets it just continues to soldier on, like in San Francisco, where FM reception is pretty horrible. And they have a couple of great AM talk stations. Now, I haven't listened personally lately, but I am told by some people that some new ownership has really hurt some legendary AM stations by getting rid of the top talent. So getting rid of those big salaries, I'm sure, has made some shareholders happy, but at what price in the long term? I'm not qualified to really comment on that so well. I'm repeating what others have said here. Technically, AM, it just gets worse and worse. And the reason for that is we get more and more devices in our lives, like CFL lamps and even LED lamps. I've got in my office here, I've got switch mode power supplies on some track lighting, and they put out noise. It seems like every device made nowadays puts out electrical noise, and a fair amount of that in the AM broadcast band and also in shortwave too. So whether it's a modem, even a little wall wart power supply can spew all kinds of RF noise, making devices that used to be usable, making them unusable. And so the amount of just urban RF noise has just been going up and up and up, rendering AM reception worse and worse and worse over the past few decades. A good friend of mine named Chuck Kelly, who works for Nautel, they make AM and FM TV transmitters now. He did a great paper on this, just showing the huge increase in man-made noise in the atmosphere. Again, rendering AM stations hard to listen to. That was one of the hopes that AM digital, that AM HD radio would help overcome. But because digital has a cliff, whereas analog AM just gets worse and worse and worse until it's unlistenable. Digital is either pretty perfect or it's not or it doesn't work at all. Anyway, so where's the future of AM? You know, it used to be for decades and decades that anywhere there was good content, people would go to an effort to pick it up. And a good example of that is I worked for a station near Memphis that was a rock station. It was actually licensed to Osceola, Arkansas. And there was going to be a move-in, a rim shot, if you will, station. And we played some great rock music. It was just an awesome station, great content. And honestly, I felt it was better than the incumbent rock station in Memphis. And I would talk to people who said, man, I just put up an antenna outside, man, to pick up your station because it's so good. So people to acquire good quality content. However, nowadays there's great content in so many places you look. I mean, it's hard not to live your life without bumping into Pandora or TuneIn Radio or podcasts like this one or iTunes. And there's all these ways to get content. XM, Sirius, that it does begin to marginalize the other content. But I do think that for individuals, these things wax and wane. I have a 16-year-old daughter who, for a couple of years, it was iPod only. It's all she would listen to. As soon as she discovered her iPod, that's all she'd listen to. Then she got tired of the same 200 songs over and over and over again. So on the way to school, when I was driving her to school, she would say, would you turn on a such and so station? So why don't you listen to your iPod? I mean, I'm happy to turn it on, but why don't you listen to your iPod? She said, well, that's the same stuff over and over again. I want to hear something new. Or I want to hear what Jackie says in the morning. You know, she would listen to a station here called The Fish, and so we sometimes we hunger for something topical, something new, something that's not the same song for the 700th time. Will radio survive that? Man, I don't know. I think for one of my friends, and I'd love to have him as a guest on the TWiRT show, suggested that, you know, radio, okay, we've got iHeartRadio, and that's becoming somewhat popular. It's not just Clear Channel stations anymore.
I was going to say, isn't it just Clear Channel? But I guess they added some more now.
Yeah. But what if the radio industry partnered with Pandora? Now, Pandora is becoming terrifically popular. Radio executives want to minimize the claimed popularity that Pandora says they have. But I say, well, their measurement stats are different. They're not right. Whatever the reason may be. But I tell you, my daughter listens to Pandora a lot. I do sometimes. What if there was a Pandora version of your radio station that was your content, and it might carry a certain amount of ads from your station, and then a certain amount would have to be Pandora sold ads. I don't know. It's tough. Radio's still free. It's still, you can pick it up with a $9 flavor radio from Radio Shack.
I think there'll always be a place for FM and, you know, even AM to an extent. You know, you brought up something interesting in that's content. And you said if there's good content, people will go wherever it is. And I agree with you. And I think for many people in broadcasting, they really saw satellite radio as the place to go when FM was going to that jack format. Everything was automated. You get rid of the disc jockeys, and now it's just a playlist and some guy that comes on and says, you know, oh, you're listening to Jack FM, and back to the same song. I think a lot of people saw satellite radio as the place that you could create new talent in radio, and you could have a voice. But that was not the case with it, right? I mean, as somebody that was involved in radio, did you see that? Were people excited at first that, wow, we have another place to go? And it just went away?
That's a good question. Oh, wow.
Because
Wow.
at the time, I have a couple friends that worked for K-Rock here in New York, a Howard Stern station, and when Howard was getting ready to leave, a lot of these guys were really excited that they could go to satellite radio and, you know, still have a voice because K-Rock was switching over to a different format at the time. And a lot of people went, and then they realized, well, they're kind of going to an automated place too, and there's a top, you know, 10 people on the entire satellite radio spectrum, and that's it. And you really can't develop this new way of getting your voice out there. It's almost like the same exact thing, just in a pay model.
Man, you asked some great questions, and it's hard to make generalizations about all this stuff, except I would make this generalization. Sometimes I want to hear my favorite song by The Who, or there's an artist I like here in Nashville named Joy Williams. I want to hear that, or George Strait if I'm in a country mood. I want to hear that same song for the 85th time and maybe even sing along or hum along with it, or, you know, beat a pencil on the steering wheel as I drive along to it. There's other times I want to be educated. My mind wants to be a sponge and soak something up. So I'll listen to a podcast, you know, I still subscribe to a couple from the TWiRT network. I subscribe to a couple from your network too now. Like Paul Thurrott. I love to hear Paul Thurrott pontificate on what's going on with Windows. So, you know, I want to soak these things in. That now there's easy to get, you know, books on tape, audiobooks, I guess is the right word. So, man, there's just so many things to enjoy and listen to. My mom is almost she's about 70 years old. She listens to the radio, typically to NPR stations when she's in her car, but she doesn't really want to fiddle with an iPod. So it's all over the spectrum. Now, they say that radio's listenership is still huge. Every day, every week, something like 96-97% of Americans hear a radio, or actively listen to the radio for some period of time. Certainly it's getting diluted, but when you look at the stats, the radio's not diluted that much. Although for me, I'm just at a point in my life, I'm not listening to much radio.
But I think that attributes. I mean, I'm not listening to radio either currently, but yeah, that's because there's no talent. Not that there's no talent, as in there's nobody good doing it, but like New York really does not have a morning guy anymore. You know, we have the morning zoo, but I mean, there used to be so many options you had at one point. You know, California still, LA still has a pretty decent market for talk, but that's kind of fading too when you talk about talk radio. And the content and the creation of, you know, talent. I discussed this on one of the previous IAIB Spotlights, and I had Mike Phillips on, and you know he's a guy inside radio, and we were discussing talent, and I got an email following the interview we did, and the guy actually had a good point. His point is that syndication hurt the talent, and it's because you couldn't come up in a small market and kind of move up to the big leagues like that, because you always had a big guy in your market competing with you. So if, let's say, I don't know, I'm thinking let's throw Rush Limbaugh. Let's say Rush Limbaugh was in your market, and he was on the same time slot competing with you, and you did a similar type of show, most people would be listening to Rush and not you. So his point was this whole explosion of syndicating the shows all across the country and being in hundreds of markets all across the U.S. hurt the small-time guy to build his talent.
Yeah, that certainly is a valid point. Although I would argue that there's still plenty of opportunity. If somebody let's say I said, you know, I want to be a talk show host. I got stuff to say. I'm good at interacting with people. I could find a station here in Nashville where I live that would let me on the air. No, it wouldn't be across from Rush Limbaugh or Mike Huckabee. No, it wouldn't be Morning Drive. But I could get on the air somewhere and develop my talent. Now, then what would be the next step? Well, the next step might be pretty tough, because then you'd be at the point of asking a station to not carry Phil Valentine or put me on the air across from a Phil Valentine or a Neil Bortz or a Rush Limbaugh or whoever it might be. I was going to say Dr. Laura, but you don't compete against Dr. Laura anymore. She's not on the radio anymore. I think that for somebody who really wants to, you can find opportunities. I think it will not accidentally happen to anybody anymore. There will not be any more accidental stars.
Do you feel that, and that kind of leads into something else with FM, do you feel that the FCC should allow more FM stations to be authorized than previously permitted? I think it's docket 80 through 90.
Yeah, well, yeah, Doc 8090 came along in the 1980s. I guess in 1980 is when it was started. You know, that's tough. I have mixed feelings about that. My general feeling is, that from a technical point of view, we really do in many areas, in most areas, especially east of the Mississippi, we have all the FM stations on the air that you can fit into the dial without interfering with each other. And there's people in the LPFM group who say, "Oh, that's not true. You can do that. You can have closer spacing. It's okay." Or you can have closer spacing and it's not okay. If somebody wants to be a radio station owner, there are plenty of opportunities. Just like, let's say, for example, my dream in life was to be a gas station owner. That's my dream, to own a service station. Well, I'm probably not going to be able to go buy a gas station right at the exit of Paradise Road off I-15 in Las Vegas.
Sure.
That's not going to be my first gas station. But if I want to buy a station from a guy who's retiring in West Undershirt, Arkansas, yeah, he's probably going to sell it for $50,000, and I can come up with enough money to buy it or put it on a credit card. Well, I got to tell you, that's how I got started in radio ownership, was with my business partner, Larry Fuss, and we built our first 6 radio stations on credit cards. I mean, Amex and Visa.
Wow.
Okay? The first station that Larry bought, and I was part of the purchase, the first station we bought for, I want to say it was $50,000 with a down payment of something like $1,000 and the rest, over 4 years. You can buy a radio station cheap if that's what you want to do. Now where was it? It was in Cleveland, Mississippi. And one of the stations was licensed, I think, to Boyle, Mississippi. Well, you got to start somewhere. And we parlayed that. Larry, through most of his work and a bit of work from me, we parlayed an AM/FM combo, and the AM was off the air. We parlayed that into a 9-station network. We sold 7 of those stations for about $2 million. We didn't walk away rich. We paid our bills and left town. It's possible to do this kind of stuff, but when people complain that, all the stations are owned by the big corporations, no, they're not. But maybe all the ones that you may think you want to buy are.
Yeah. Well, Mike Phillips in our chat room said a guy in his area, in his market, bought a dark AM station for dark AM for $1, and he put it on the air and he sold it for $1 million.
That's entirely possible. I don't think he'd sell for $1 million today. Yeah, I was really disappointed to see that WOR in New York sold for $30 million, because it's my understanding that a few years ago, the late Rick Buckley had been offered $154 million for the same property.
That's a big drop.
And by the way, I don't know the whole story, and so excuse me if I'm speaking out of school on this, but I think that the whole notion, I'm a libertarian thinker. I'm big on somebody having a dream and building a business and making it go. And honestly, the business won't go without that person or a surrogate for that person who has the same kind of dream. Rick Buckley, who owned Buckley Broadcasting, passed away about a year ago. And after he passed, it's my understanding that the value of WOR, the programming, went downhill. They went to a lot of just time brokerage. They would sell you an hour. You buy an hour, you want to sell some snake oil? Sure, we'll sell you the hour. The station went in that direction, and its value plummeted precipitously. Again, there's other factors too. There's the general recession, and there's the general lowering of station values.
I mean, AM in general, here in New York, I could tell you, a lot of it is pay for play now.
Yeah, and that pay for play. What a nice way to say, selling snake oil and chiropractic services. Okay, not that there's anything wrong with chiropractic services, but you get what? It's not compelling content. It's niche content that is compelling to a few people, sure, but it's not the kind of thing that's going to get you big ratings and increase the value of your station. Hey, I love listening to you, Paul Thurrott, Leo Laporte, Steve Gibson. I really like Steve Gibson. These people are people who are compelling for me to listen to, and that's who has my ear when I'm spending time filling my head with something.
So now let's talk a little bit about internet broadcasting and how it's changing and where you think it's headed. There's a lot of people doing it right now. A lot of radio guys are coming into the internet world. Phil Hendry has been doing it for a couple of years now. You see, people like Glenn Beck and Howard Stern has teased, possibly going online. A lot of these names from radio are making a transition. Where do you see internet radio headed? What do you think that means to guys coming up like myself and anybody else, and a bunch of our members on the IAIB? They're up and coming guys. Do you feel that it hurts the up and coming guys to have the big names jump ship and come to the internet and put their broadcasts here? Or do you think it actually helps us and it elevates what we're doing and people actually consider it as a legitimate way of broadcasting?
Question, it helps and elevates. Absolutely. Here's the driving factor. Let's say that I want to listen to Glenn Beck and I'm in my car a lot. How do I listen to Glenn Beck in my car? Well, right now I have to take my smartphone and stream it to my Bluetooth receiver that my car may or may not have at this point. So what's gonna make internet broadcasting really come of age? It's when this stuff comes in your car without wires and without Bluetooth connectivity. It's because the car you buy now has a slot for a SIM card. Maybe you get a free. You already get 3 months free with Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile or somebody when you buy your car. Just like cars used to come with, or they still do come with, a free year of XM Sirius satellite radio, right? And certainly all rental cars do. So you get I was in a rental car just the other day and it had Sirius XM, and honestly, I had a much better experience with Sirius XM in this brand new. It was a Chevy Equinox. It was a small SUV. I had a great experience with it. It kind of made me think, I might want to be a Sirius XM subscriber after all. So when it becomes more commonplace in the car, or you can easily have a radio. Of course, I realize you can buy Wi-Fi radios. I've got one upstairs, with 14,000 different stations to choose from. As the software gets better, as the availability becomes better, it's going to be mainstream. And where's radio going to be? Not that I don't care, but to me, it's about content creation and distribution. The medium over which it goes doesn't matter that much.
But do you think something like a one-click ease of access type button, in the vehicle will kind of make it the go-to source? Ford is now adding USB ports to their cars, so you can just pop in one of those, Wi-Fi cards and the MiFi cards and just pick up, 4G access in the car, and that's phenomenal. But we still have to figure out a smart way of getting the content out there. Like you said, there's thousands of stations out there. How are we going to highlight the good ones from the bad ones and make it, I know Kirk's on at 9 o'clock. I'm going to hit, preset 6 and here it is.
Yeah. Actually, I've had some pretty good experiences lately with all this. Like I said, a couple days ago, I was in Cleveland, Ohio. I rented a Chevy Equinox, and it did not have navigation in it, but it did still have a good sized screen. I guess it was about an 8 or 9 inch screen. It was a touch screen, by the way, so you could control it with the knobs on the dash, or you could do a lot of touch on it. And hey, you had choices of XM, you had AM and FM. You could plug USB into it. It had the USB port right in the center console between the chairs, and it may have had some other options too. Of course, it had Bluetooth for your phone, and so and I found it easy to navigate these options. So I found myself listening to a bunch of XM radio, which I was reasonably pleased with the quality. Whereas a few years ago, I was in a rental car and listening to, I forget if it was either Sirius or XM, it was before they merged, and the quality was just pathetic. And I think it was because of the implementation of the decoder in the radio. It wasn't Sirius or XM necessarily getting better now than they were then. At least that's my impression. But I was okay with the quality for its entertainment value. I'll go back to my point. Yes, with Glenn Beck and Howard Stern and Phil Hendry. Who's the other guy out in California? Tom Leykis. When people who you want to follow become available only online, it just seems that the timing is right for the auto companies to be doing what they're doing and getting this stuff in the dash. And no more cables and wild stuff and having to dink with your phone while you're driving to listen to something, but have it all built in. I mean, gee, why can't Ford and Verizon or somebody, do a deal where your Ford car comes with 3 months of, free Verizon data? I mean, who's not going to continue that?
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. Now, the evolution of this is, we could all agree it's kind of headed online. Do you feel that the FCC should regulate in any way or will attempt to regulate it in any way if it's now in your car?
I hope not. The FCC should be there to take care of spectrum allocation. If they've already done that with the phone companies, allocating spectrum for data, their job's done, in my opinion.
How about as far as the content goes?
No. What in the world would our government need to be involved with content, especially if it's content you're paying for?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. And the argument is, there was an article about how, can internet access become a right, and will it become over the air? And will everybody have access to something in some way? And could that potentially lead to some sort of regulation?
Yeah. My goodness, I hope not. I'm just such in favor of competition. Competition just fixes so many things.
You're absolutely right.
The barriers to entry are ridiculously high. And by the way, I'm totally against the idea of crony capitalism, where AT&T and Verizon get together to make it impossible for anybody else to compete in that space. But when you have some real competition, and sure, it can be small players. For example, I subscribe to Clear wireless coverage, so I get WiMAX here at the house as a secondary means of internet, and I use it on the road. Well, Clear's a relatively small company compared to these other guys. Nashville was one of their first markets to go into. If I went anywhere else, I didn't have Clear. Well, now if I go to a number of other cities, I've got Clear coverage. I've got T-Mobile wireless coverage, so if I need to, I can Wi-Fi that into my laptop. I guess my point is, the more options that you have, the more honest it keeps everybody. And the better the service and the content gets. Yeah. And you know what? One thing that makes consumers uncomfortable is when you have competition and you have this Wild West world of choices that keep changing. A lot of folks are pretty, they're not comfortable with chaos. And that's what the free market is. It's chaos. As soon as things settle down, well, guess what? It's time for some other company to come in and shake things up a bit. Maybe we can divide and conquer and make some money off this by offering a $10 cheaper per month price or whatever it may be. So I've been studying this a long time, and I've noticed that folks who are uncomfortable with change tend to they're the ones who say, well, there needs to be a law. The government needs to regulate this. Well, no, the government needs to unregulate this so that different people can compete and offer choices, and then they have to compete with each other on price at some point. So you really end up getting the best thing when the government is hands off, except for things where public safety is involved, or spectrum allocation. Which, by the way, there's a complete libertarian argument for spectrum allocation, but I won't go there right now.
To kind of wrap it up, I want your opinion on internet broadcasters and podcasters and some of the things that they do right and some of the things that they do wrong. Being someone that's been involved in the radio business for 30 years, and you see online, you see the power that internet broadcasting has and will have in the coming years. What are some things that you've noticed that people do? We spoke about how processing is important. A lot of people, they don't have proper mic presence. What are some tips that you could give people as far as improving their quality?
That's a good question, and I do think that in the long run, the problems kind of take care of themselves. If you're a podcaster who has no clue technically, and your podcast sounds bad, well, in the long run, you're not going to get the listeners, and you're going to become discouraged, and you're going to go off the air, so to speak. So in that, I'm just totally in favor of free market stuff. If you are a podcaster that says, I wonder if my quality could be better, well, then you're going to probably do some research, hire somebody, talk to a salesperson at a broadcast equipment company, and educate yourself, or hire somebody who does know about getting the quality up. So to me, the couple of basic things are, obviously we're dealing with audio here to a large extent. So audio levels are important. If you're too low, if you're too hot and distorted, these are problems. So you got to understand how to get the audio levels right. And then audio processing can be helpful in just maintaining a proper audio level on your podcast. Andrew, I haven't visited you yet at your place. I don't know what you're doing for audio processing, but the levels that I hear on your podcast are pretty consistent. I know that a couple of years ago when I started working with Leo Laporte, his audio levels were kind of all over the map. And a lot of the stuff didn't sound. I mean, his was better than most, but still, it could use improvement. So we got some Omnia audio processing on his streams, and now it's extremely consistent, show to show to show, and person to person to person.
Oh, we faced that battle too. I mean, it's been an up and down thing with us, and we're now starting to kind of understand how to level everything out and try to balance everything out. But talking about processing, I think the other problem is that a lot of people, they'll get a mic processor and they'll just crank everything up.
Yeah.
And it's a big problem. I mean, especially with compression, you know, everybody thinks, oh, I should add a bunch of compression. I should put the lows up, and I want it to sound like radio. And they end up distorting everything that they're doing. So there's the less that you do, sometimes it's better.
Yeah. Well, you're right. If you do too much, it can also sound awful. Compare. Let's say that you're going to go into the business of shirt making. Okay. Let's say that was your passion, and so you bought a bunch of sewing machines, but you might have not bought the best ones, or the right ones for the job. Or maybe you bought a bunch of serger machines instead of sewing machines, or whatever. And let's say you hired some people who they really like shirts, but they never really made them before. Well, what kind of success would you have in a business like that, where you bought not the best material, crappy thread, not the right mix of sewing machines, and the people who are working for you had never done this before? Would you stand a chance of success? No,
absolutely not. Yeah, and see, this is one thing that we've tried to accomplish at the IAIB is trying to get the information out there and letting people know, some of the do's and don'ts. We have a lot of radio people on there, and people with an extensive history with engineering and broadcasting, and they'll go and they'll give advice. One of the questions that we get all the time is about mix minus. And we had a guy come on and he said, mix minus is absolutely useless. You don't need it on the internet. Skype does a good job in mix minus.
Especially needed on the internet.
You especially need it on the internet, absolutely. And one of our guys went in there and he explained to him how mix minus works. And apparently the guy was doing he had no idea what mix minus was, and he was going around telling people mix minus is useless. So if you get informed, I think you have a better understanding of it, and you could help the community. And that's what we're trying to do, is just give proper information. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. One of the things that I've noticed, and to kind of go back to the mic processors, is that a lot of people feel that because they're spending a couple $100 on a unit or $1,000 on a unit, they have to get bang for their buck, and it's almost not. It doesn't make them happy if they're not using a lot of it. You know what I mean? It's this weird thing where, well, I paid $300 for this, so I better use it. What's the point if I'm just using one knob? You know, one little click on the knob on this mic processor.
Well, if you own a car and it will go 110 miles an hour, why aren't you driving at 110 miles an hour all the time?
Yeah, exactly.
From the car. Or let's say that you buy a small airplane, you become a private airplane pilot, but you don't fly everywhere. Why don't you fly to the grocery store? Why don't you fly to your neighbor's house? Why don't you fly your kids to school every day? Well, because they're just down the street. Well, that's right. It's not right for everything. Audio processing, all the gear that we have is you use it the right way it's meant to be used. So that's a funny analogy. If people want to crank it up so they get the most out of it.
I feel that way, and we've kind of explained to people how to use it. We've almost to this point we have threads that are like tutorials on how to configure a mic processor, certain type, or how to set up Skype for mix minus. So I think if the information's out there, people are going to get it. Up until now, I really haven't seen one community. I mean, we've done it, and we're trying to build it even more, but we've built this community of experts that'll answer your questions, and I think that'll better internet broadcasting as a whole for an up-and-coming guy. Not, if you're in the business, you kind of have learned this over the last couple of years, but that's what we're trying to accomplish here with that. But you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people really don't have a grasp on how to configure things and proper mic technique, and overall just how to set it up.
Well, and this is back to the analogy of the shirt factory. You if you're going to go into business, to do something, you want to make sure you understand what it is that you're getting into. And I guess either podcasters, maybe some of them make it look easy, or, hey, it's just audio, I can hook up a stereo, this shouldn't be a problem. Or, hey, I used to do dance, I used to DJ dances, or I play music at weddings. Well, these things qualify you to play music at weddings and DJ dances and hook up your stereo. They don't necessarily mean that you have nothing else to learn to do a podcast, especially with multiple players. And what's also interesting is that here you and I are talking about getting knowledge out there to help others compete against us. Isn't that interesting?
Do you feel that there is competition? To an extent there is, but because mostly everything is on demand now, right? Everything is a podcast. Everything is on demand. Do you feel that it's true competition?
Yeah, a good point. I get, for my limited amount of time I have to stick stuff in my brain, through my ears. I guess, there's some competition. I mean, I really like Steve Gibson's Security Now podcast. So that's one thing I'm going to listen to week in, week out, no matter what else gets pressed out of the way. Other podcasts are more at my leisure. So, and then when I get tired of podcasts, I still, punch my favorite songs up. Kirk's favorite playlist on the iPod.
I mean, everything is competing with us at this point. There's so much competition. I mean, your iPhone is a competition. The games that you can play on an iPhone technically compete with you because you're doing that rather than listening to my show. Right. If you're putting out good content, people will listen to you regardless. I think it comes to good content, really.
And Spence keeps asking, "Am I going to listen to the Bald Truth?" Do guys with a lot of hair listen to the Bald Truth?
I listen every week because I'm hanging on for dear life. I'm just hanging out for dear life to this head of hair I have.
Yeah, it's funny. Back when I was about 27 years old, my hairline receded to exactly where it is now, and for a few weeks I was kind of worried. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go bald, by the time I'm 30, and that's the time that I could have used a guy like Spencer to tell me, okay, here's what the story is. But I forget what I was going to say about all that. There's a purpose and a place and a niche for so many subjects. Hey, you may do a podcast. Somebody may do one on starting a sewing company. I don't. There's people who need to hear that.
Yeah, and it's amazing because his show is one of the most popular shows we have on the network. And every week, we do the live chat room, and we have hundreds of people in the room, and we get thousands of downloads per episode. And it's amazing to think it's such a niche topic. Actually, it's not really because most men suffer from some sort of hair loss, but it's a niche type of programming that's able to be successful on the internet. Where on radio, he's even said he was on the radio for 13 years. It was a little different. It's kind of difficult to try to convince a program director to put you on or a station manager to put you on to do a show on hair loss.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you've got and back when radio indeed ruled the airwaves, when any audio content you were going to get was going to come from the radio, then yeah, people had to be very circumspect about what they put on. Of course, radio still thinks they have to, and maybe they do, being a mass medium. But it's interesting that the next mass medium, the internet, has unlimited channels, bandwidth, shows. So you can do a show where you're talking to 20 people if you want to, or 200 people, or 2,000, or 200,000 people. The costs, to do a show on the radio, to run the transmitter and run the station and all that, there's a pretty big fixed cost. To do this on the internet, the barrier to entry is very low. I guess that's a good way to say it. The barrier to entry on the internet is very, very low, and so you can do a show that initially may not appeal to a lot of people, and you'd grow that over time, or not.
Let me ask you this. 10 years from now, where do you think internet radio will be? Internet broadcasting will be?
Yeah, I just have this feeling that it will be ubiquitous. It will be everywhere. And so, of course, your local AM and FM radio stations will definitely be on the internet. They'll pay as much attention to that stream or more as they do to the others. And I've got a good analogy for that in just a minute. And do I see a day that sometime we'll turn the transmitters off the air? Yeah. Yeah, of course. There'll be a day when we turn AM and FM transmitters off the air. Now, let me give you the analogy on TV. 20 years ago, more than that. Holy cow, it's been 25 years ago. I was at a cable TV head end in Richmond, Kentucky. It happened to be located right next to the radio station I worked at. And I was looking at their distribution. They had recently upgraded their distribution to cover lots of little suburbs all around the county. They would microwave the whole freaking thing, the whole bandwidth, all the channels would go by microwave out to these little bedroom communities in which they'd pick them up and distribute them via cable locally out there in the bedroom community. Well, I'm thinking, with all this, I said, what's the penetration rate? I mean, how many people are on cable? They said, well, in our market, it's about 76%. 76%? You mean these TV stations have their transmitter on and all the expense just to hit the other 24% of the audience? I mean, okay, it's an important 24%, but what happens when the cable penetration goes to 80% and 85% and 90%? What happens when cable penetration and direct TV and everything else, what happens when that's 95%? Why would a station still spend hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million a year, to keep a big honking UHF TV transmitter on the air? Why? And so I think we're going to, well, and hey, I'm the backup weather guy at the Fox affiliate here in Nashville. So I spent a little time over there talking to the engineers, and, Fox 17 runs, well, for a while they were running, analog and digital transmitters. Now they've, been able to turn off the analog, but they still run a digital transmitter. And they were showing me through the infrastructure of the TV station. They said, now this box right here, this is the most important box in the TV station. I said, really? It's not the transmitter? They said, oh, no, not the transmitter. This is the box that takes our video and actually from all three of the stations that are in this building and pipes it over to Comcast, which is just down the street here. So, so if that box goes out, you've lost what? He said 80% of our viewers.
Wow. So
there's going to come a day. Why run the TV transmitter? Now you're going to, sure, there's exceptions. People are going to say, well, yeah, but I want to watch TV at the beach or at the baseball game. Well, that's what, video over internet's going to be for.
Sure, yeah. That's what the phone is for. There's been, it seems like, let me rephrase this actually, because I'm getting questions as we're doing this. And one of the questions was good. It seems like video, even for radio format shows, has become the popular thing. Leo Laporte does it. We do it. Plenty of other people do it. Where we're doing a radio format type show, we have the microphone in front of us, and we're not really looking at the camera. There's no set really behind us. Do you feel that that's the direction that internet broadcasting is going and internet radio is going, where there's always going to be a camera there? Or do you think it could survive with just being talk?
I think adding video is not that big a burden as you demonstrate. Yeah, are you doing the switching on the show yourself?
I am, yeah. I'm just smashing buttons as I go along.
Some years Leo did the switching himself. He also did lower thirds himself. And Leo, although being a TV guy, he paid more attention than you do. Just to make a comparison, he would be looking at the camera more often. Does that matter? I don't know. I mean, people, even if you have the TV on, you're listening to all the content. You're probably actually viewing 10, 20, 30% of it while you're doing something else, right? I mean, if I've got the CNN or Fox News or something on my TV, I'm not glued to it. My eyes aren't. My ears can't help it though. So is the video important? Yeah. It's not that. I think it's easier to do video than it is to do audio.
And it's what's funny? It's far less expensive to do video than audio, and I never understood that.
Isn't that amazing?
And I'll tell you why. We also have an audio-only stream that we pay a lot of money for. And I never understood why it costs more to do an audio-only stream than it is to do video. And I'm thinking, well, maybe because there's so much competition with video now, it's become a niche thing to only do audio-only, and they're able to kind of make money on it. They're able to make a couple bucks.
Huh.
I don't know. It's interesting to me how video has kind of taken over even for radio. I don't look at the camera, and people always say, like, how come you don't look at the camera? Well, it's kind of annoying because I actually have to monitor what's happening if I'm staring at it because I don't have a monitor across from me. But I always feel that it's a voyeuristic feel. People are looking at me in my studio rather than me talking to them and looking directly at the camera. But that's the way that we've done it here. I don't necessarily think that that's the right or wrong way of doing it.
Here's another reason. I was just thinking about this. I'm part owner of a couple radio stations in American Samoa. People say, where? American Samoa?
Which you were just there, right?
You go to Hawaii and turn left, and halfway to New Zealand, there's a little part of America down there called American Samoa. Anyway, our top 40 station we have there called 93 KHJ, we have video on the morning show, and it's put out over we have a cable channel on the cable TV. Now, why do we do that? Well, it's not hard to do. It does give people, I think, a little better connection as to who they're listening to. And guess what? TV sets are probably as or more ubiquitous now than radios. I mean, people have a TV set freaking everywhere, right?
Sure.
So if you're going to listen to the KHJ Samoan Sunrise morning show, you can turn your TV on and you can listen to it. And if you occasionally have a chance to walk by it and while you're getting ready in the morning and see, there's John and there's Sia and there's LJ well, you can identify them with them as well that way. It's the same audio. It's just now you can see them too.
Now
So
you can see them too. Yeah, I find it interesting how it's running that way. So to kind of wrap it up because we're running out of time, I want you to tell us about This Week in Radio Tech. You guys have just joined the GFK Network. We had our first show last week. For people who don't know the show, what is the show about?
well, we probably didn't name it exactly right. It's a bit topical. Sometimes we talk about current news stories that apply to the radio broadcasting business. We talk a little bit about consumer electronics. If there's something really hot new that's audio wise, we might review it. But the show is mostly about audio and RF, radio frequency technologies, and what we have to say is so often applicable to other allied technologies, whether you're involved with audio for PA or for live sound, for audio for television, just audio for your own stereo. People will ask us, "Hey, should I buy these monster cables?" And I can't think of a single broadcast engineer who would say, "Yeah, you need to buy those." They're going to say, "Don't waste the money, really. I mean, lamp cord is just fine." Of course, there's people who disagree with that too. So we have a good time talking about broadcast technology, and so often it's mixed in with computer IT technology, telephony, telephone technology, IP technology. So once in a while, we'll do a show that is more of a tutorial. So if you really want to learn about something, we'll do a tutorial show. We'll explain how amplitude modulation works in creating it and decoding it, listening to it, how frequency modulation works, how HD radio works. And then how codecs work. What is MP3? What does MP3 do to audio, and how does it affect it in order to cut its bandwidth by 90% and then ship it out as a stream? So those are the kind of things that we talk about. And sometimes we just have fun. About once every 10 episodes, we'll do a war stories episode where we'll tell about life in the trenches and what happened. Like the night I went to the transmitter site and there was a car there full of naked people. So we have a.
Is that a true story?
Absolutely, yeah. Transmitter sites way out in the country, and odd things go on at them.
That's amazing. I want to hear that one when you guys do it. The show airs every Thursday at 8 p.m. East on the GFK Network. Also, I want to remind everybody you could follow Kirk on Twitter, K Harnack. We're going to have a link on our website for that. Kirk, thank you so much for joining me. I had a great time, and I could talk to you for hours about this stuff, and I know the viewers got a kick out of it too.
It has been a blast, and I'd be happy to return anytime for just a one-on-one session. We have this podcast called This Week in Radio Tech, and hey, at some point, maybe it's going to be time for that podcast as it stands to end, and maybe something else come along. I'm just interested in getting some of the interesting knowledge that occasionally I have, but more often people who I know have, and bring that out to an audience in the form of a podcast, so that we can share this information and stories and advice and tips. And again, whether it continues to be This Week in Radio Tech or morphs into something else later, I want to bring that kind of content to your audience.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kirk. I want to also remind everybody, if you miss any portion of the show, you can check it out on our website, gfknetwork.com. You could also get it at the IAIB, the International Association of Internet Broadcasters. If you're an up-and-coming broadcaster, you've been doing this for a while, and you broadcast on the internet, you could sign up. Membership is totally free at the IAIB. We also have an unbelievable forum with experts and industry insiders on there. So if you have a question, you could just go there and post it, and I'm sure someone will be there to help you out. To wrap it up, we'll see you all next week, guys, on the IAIB Spotlight. Take care.